All right, friends. Back after our massive LARP hiatus through the pandemic when we couldn't socialize together, and I finally got to go to a LARP game again. Whoo boy. Um, I'm gonna try and go through everything sort of chronologically, because I think that's the easiest way for me to organize my thoughts about things. And also, I played a new character. This game. Um, Someone who I've never played before at an Underworld LARP game. We were at Underworld LARP Zenithstrand, by the way, which is the Saskatchewan chapter of Underworld LARP, which is a dark fantasy LARP. Basically, they say horror, but it's always felt like dark fantasy to me. But I will admit, it's much scarier when you have a character who can't really fight anything. Which was sort of our situation. So my new character, her name is Marika Devereaux. Marika. And she's a high elf, like protections sigilist. So she describes herself to people as a high elf abjurist, protections buffer character. I have some pictures. Here she is. This is her. I'm particularly proud of this costume. It feels very representative of the way the character is and so forth. And the responses that I got at game were super nice, very cool. Lots of good compliments about the old character. But yeah, so she was kind of my like getting into that character and like feeling her out during this weekend was kind of my goal. Like a new character, new outfit, new social outlook on like the game space and so forth. Because before this, I've played a grumpy wild elf who hates people and will attack for pretty much any reason, for like 4 years. You know what I mean? Like somebody who plays the like intimidation game before this for like 4 years. And this character is definitely not that. She's more of a put upon academic, with a little bit of sass and some like light social graces, some manners, when she needs to have them. She's a fastidious documenter of things. I wrote down a lot of stuff during this game, so that we would remember it for next game and that we would have it like available. She's sort of like a logistician wizard abjurist. Like the way that I kind of described her in a D&D sense is that she's very high intelligence, but like only middling wisdom and charisma. You know what I mean? Like somewhere in like 10 across for like wisdom and charisma, but like very high for intelligence if we were going to stat her out in D&D. So yeah, she's not really the talker of the group. Alice, who is Siobhan's character, who's a hobbling, which is like halfling, a hobbling, roguish character. I don't want to give her games away. We were trying to set up a tea house and like run a little business. So we got like a burner and like a little kettle you could put on top of it and like propane tank and stuff, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Siobhan's character is sort of like more the socialite. Yeah, so first off, the absolute first thing you have to know about going to LARP is that packing your car to go isn't of itself a task, right? It is a thing that I forgot how much work it is to pack a whole campsite up into a car and drive it across, for 2 or 3 hours to where we're going to be. And our tent is this massive canvas behemoth. It's such a nice tent. It's absolutely the greatest. But it has so many pieces that are needed. There's like the center posts, which we have to like store on the roof of the car and like strap down. There's the canvas, which takes up like probably a quarter of the entire space in the back, like by itself, with one of the back seats down. And it's heavy as hell, like super difficult to move. And then there's the like wooden posts that go along the outside of the tent to like give it tension. That's another like, 12 or so like little wooden posts. There's the ropes and the pegs that you use for that stuff, and making sure we have all that stuff with us. Like, that's just the tent. And then it's like all of our stuff, like the cot to sleep on, blankets, like character stuff, weapons and armor and what have you, like, that kind of stuff. And it can pile up real fast. We had 3 people because Mike, our roommate, came with us as well. 3 people in the car, and it was packed. It was packed enough that me in the back seat, I was like, stuff was like avalanching on me almost. You know what I mean? Like, it was packed to the brim. And people are asking in chat, do you need like an in-universe tent? Can't you just like use one of those pop-out modern style ones? You can. You definitely 100% can use a modern tent. Nobody is gonna fault you for that. Nobody is gonna make a problem about that. That is completely allowed. We've just made the choice to use a big canvas behemoth. You know what I mean? Like that's our decision for immersion to do that. So it's our own folly. But it's so cool. It's such a big tent. It's like 9 feet by 16 feet by 11 feet. Like 9, 16, 11, it's like, it's big. It's a big space, and it's really great because, like, if it rains or whatever, there's still a space that we have where we can, like, stand up while inside while it's raining. You know what I mean? Like, the tent is large enough for us to stand in and move about in, and it's fucking cool. I wish I had, like, I hadn't thought to, like, prep a picture for it. I would put a picture up here. I've done it before in previous LARP videos when we mentioned the tent, where I just show you for scale our roommate standing in front of it, and he looks small by comparison, and he's like 6'4". So it's really cool, but it takes a lot of packing. And it takes a lot of unpacking. We crammed everything into the car. We sardined our way into the car. I mean, I sardined my way into the car anyway. And the other 2, I mean, Siobhan is driving, so obviously she doesn't have anything encroaching on her. And Mike is in the front seat because he's a big boy and he needs the space. So I sardined myself into the back of the car and DJ'd all the while with my phone from the back seat, which love it. Our Siobhan and I tend to make character playlists on our Spotify for LARP stuff, because it just like feels like a really good way to get into the vibes as we're going along. But we didn't really have any for these characters yet because we haven't played them yet, so we weren't sure who they were yet. So we just played other character playlists and enjoyed our trip. It's a long drive. It's like 3 hours basically to get to the site from where we are. Which isn't as bad as the winter site, which is like way far away. But we're not going back there. So we don't have to do that anymore. But yeah, the site's about 3 hours away. It's about the limit of what Siobhan wants to drive. You know what I mean? Like, after 3 hours, she's like, this is enough driving. Like, very, very much so. So I'm glad it's within range. Once we get there, it's dark. We'd had plenty of like pit stops for, caffeine and supplies, got our food and what have you on the way. And when we got to the site, it was like sundown, probably like 9 p.m. ish. we angled the car. People were still setting up, so we were good to just like pull in. We angled the car so we could use the headlights to like put the tent up. So we just like used the headlight lamp to put the tent up. We recruited some people nearby who were, you know, idling around because they'd been there for a while already, or what have you. You know, some folks in full costume. I think Jeremiah was one of them. And put the tent up. It's one of those things where like you need a couple of people to just like hold it steady while everybody else, you know, pegs in the like side ropes and stuff, because you have to like stick the canvas on the top of the post and then sort of hoist the posts up so that the canvas hangs off the post both sides, and then pull it like taut both directions. Anyway, it's a whole ordeal. It's a thing. It's a mess sometimes. But we you know, we fell back into it in a pretty practiced way, and it was done relatively quickly. It was really weird. I say weird, like fun and weird, seeing everybody again, because it had been like a year and a half since we'd last had a game. It was like 18 months or something like that. So everybody was like the same but different, you know? It's like I haven't communicated with like probably 90% of these people over the course of the like break, because I'm terrible at like keeping up with my friends. But it's really nice to just like fall back into that old pattern of being like, hey, and that person's like, hey, I haven't seen you in forever, and like, you know, just like being friends again with people. And it's kind of nice. I was a little bit worried that that it would be like, hey, I haven't talked to you in 18 months. What the fuck, man? You know, or what have you. Like, just I was, you know, I had this irrational worry that my friends wouldn't be my friends, but that wasn't the case. It was like very, very easy to get back into that rhythm of like just people I know and stuff, you know, going on. It's fine. Did our like little login stuff, got all my tags written out, because first time characters don't have any items. They need to get their items from logistics. So you know, we went up to the logistics tent and got our items. I have 14 armor of hardened leather. Hell yeah, that's the like bracers and stuff you see in the picture. The bracers, the belt, and the greaves. Let me flip back to the picture. You can see I've got like these neat armor pieces. And then I had a staff. I brought a staff with me because I figured unarmed was probably actually a bad idea. Yeah. And got that stuff all written up for me. Got my phys reps, my physical representations, my weapons and my armor and stuff checked for safety. And everything was good. It's fine, perfect. Yeah, we, you know, got it all sorted out and headed back to the old tent to wait for game to start. Probably about an hour after that, they were calling for people to come to orientation. So we went to go and like stand in our gang and listen to our game master tell us what the deal was. Tammy once again in control of the Zenithstrand plot team. She's the owner of Underworld Zenithstrand and a good friend of mine and former roommate. And it was nice to see her again. But she sort of told us what was up. The game was starting with us being pulled into the Wormwood, which is like the plane of nature. It's like the Feywild, you know what I mean, for Underworld. So the Wormwood is like the plane of nature, and we're gonna start by being like pulled in unwillingly to the plane of nature. So it's like, okay, That's how the game's gonna start. And they told us to separate into groups of 5. So we did. It was me, Siobhan. I think our group was a character named Quintus, who was a wild elf, and Macgard, like Sir Estevan Macgard, which is Ryan's character, one of Ryan's characters, who used to play like Gen Bespin stuff with me. So Ryan and I are friends. And who was our 5th person? Oh, Wyatt's character, Calder, was our 5th person, who is a purple draconian. So that was our group. We volunteered to be the first group to be pulled into the Wormwood. They're like, so who's group 1? And I'm like, us, we're group 1, hell yeah. Oh, the other thing was that anybody above level 5, as soon as you entered the Wormwood, you were afflicted with a greater curse. And the greater curse was that you're a greater curse of weakness. So you had -8 strength as soon as you entered the Wormwood. Which I thought was really a neat little way to like initially ease people into like playing the game and not swinging the big numbers, you know, and like getting the playing field a little bit even for people who are coming in new or people who are like super veterans. Like if you're above level 5, you breathe in the spores and get a greater curse of weakness, and it, you know, gives you that -8 strength. How much is -8 strength? So, every point of strength, correlates to 1 point of weapon damage for 2-handed weapons, and 2 to 1 for, like, single-handed weapons. So, -4 damage to swings for most people, and then -8 for people with, like, really big weapons. But it was really funny because, like, I was affected, but I'm a wizard. So, I don't care. You know, like, I already swing for 1, and it's down to a minimum of 1, so if I'm gonna, like, it's still 1 when I hit you with a stick, you know? And all of my stuff is just buffing other people, so, it really didn't mean much to me, which, you know, was great. Anyhow. Oh no, waving your hands around just got slightly harder. Incanting spells, oh no. Yeah. Anyhow, so we volunteered to be the first group in, and we got escorted up to the place we were gonna spawn. It's like kind of dark, and you know, it's probably about like 10:30 or what have you at this point. It's like dark out. We get led up to this little lantern near a little tree, and we get told that we just need to like spawn in. So you're just gonna do a five count. So most things are a 5 count. So you just do like whatever the action is 1, whatever the action is 2, whatever the action is 3. You know what I mean? Like to like declare that something is happening, when it's not something that is like tracked by the game. So we were told to just like get thrown into the Wormwood, and then you're in game. And they just like put us in there, and so we're as a group, we're nervously looking around, and we go like, entering the Wormwood 1, entering the Wormwood 2, entering the Wormwood 3, entering the Wormwood 4, entering the Wormwood 5, and boom, we spawn in and we get like thrown into the Wormwood. We don't necessarily know the people around us or anything. Like our group was basically all strangers except for Alice and I. And we sort of were confused as to why we were there, and there was a wood fae there, the lore keeper, who seemed also confused as to why we were all there. And we didn't really have time to have a conversation, because about a second later, some Church of Light goons spawned in, and we've been at war with the Church of Light basically forever. They're sort of like a Purge the Heretics vibe at the moment. So they technically are the good guys, but they're really not doing good guy stuff at the moment. They're the light followers. So they got pulled in as well. And we ended up in this standoff where they're like, "Are you with the Church of Light? Declare yourselves," and so forth. Um, and all of that kind of nonsense was going on. And we were like, no, yeah, totally. Praise Cassandra or whatever, just like make up some stuff and try and like not get killed because it's just the five of us and then these Church of Light goons. And over the course of time, more and more groups get like thrown into this situation, player groups, and stuff starts getting more and more chaotic, basically, like as we're going along. Because more players are getting involved and more NPCs are getting agitated, and like the fighting starts, because of course it does. Like it's never gonna just be like chill. So anyway, that happens, and then there's a lot of me trying to like introduce myself to people and find out what's going on, and I managed to make some friends with our group, like Quintus and Sir Estevane. Give out some protections and just generally like introduce myself, Marika Devereaux. Like I don't know what's going on here. Why are we in the Wormwood? This is a bad situation. I corner the lore keeper for a couple questions, and I say like, what happened? And the lore keeper says, well, we did a ritual to bring people to defend the like world tree sapling. But we didn't get the right people, or the ritual went wrong somehow, so it brought you here. Sorry. But could you defend the sapling of the world tree, please? sort of an ask. Well, I mean, we did from the Church of Light, who were, there and confused and stuff, but really I don't really think the sapling was under any threat particularly. And that was like kind of our first evening. A little bit of combat, a little bit of like introductions and making friends and what have you. It was nice to sort of have our little like first group, because it meant like on an out of game level that even if in character we didn't know the characters, like we had like some form of introduction to the people that we were around, even if the characters didn't know anybody. So it was pretty quick that like Sir Estevane, Quintus, and Calder, myself, and Alice became like, we had like a loose friendship initially. It was like quite easy to get that going. Yeah. And that was kind of our first night. There was a little bit more fighting with the Church of Light, but mostly it was sorting things out, getting our camp set up, and finding our feet a little bit. Being in the Wormwood, they warned us that like animals are dangerous because this is the plane of nature, and if you fuck with the animals, you're very, very likely to get murdered by the animals, because the animals are like the representation of all of that kind of animal. So like rabbit is like the natural representation of all rabbits, you know what I mean? Or like moose is the natural representation of all mooses. So they're like avatar-ish like creatures of the Wormwood that you shouldn't fuck with, basically. Yes, the animal. Yeah, that kind of a situation. Yeah, exactly. So singularity of bunny, exactly. And also that the animals can communicate. They speak freely with people. Like they can communicate with you. Yeah. And they're kind of like the sentient creatures of this plane, Whew. Just trying to remember if there's anything else Friday night. I think it was mostly making introductions and giving people buffs. I think I gave out a lot of like protections and sigils during that first evening, just to like sort of introduce like what I do and who I am and stuff, which was cool. I was happy to be that person, and I got a lot of compliments after game of being like useful, which is nice. I think Siobhan and I, like Alice and I, went back to our tent and like sort of set things up, got our bed set up and chairs on the outside of the tent, and some people came around, and like we had some little talks with folks about whatever, or little introductions with folks who didn't know anybody else or what have you. Quintus, Calder, and Macgard hung out, or Sir Esthane, as I knew him, hung out with us like a whole bunch that night, and we kind of just like shot the shit and like talked about stuff and made excuses for situations. Like, my thing was, well, I had lots of cash, but I just put it on the gambling table in Zenithstrand. Like, I was just about to win a hand of cards, and then I got pulled into the wormwood, and all my money was on the table, so it's probably gone now. The freaking pirates have taken it, which is just like a fun way to explain like this high elf wizard, well-dressed high elf wizard having like no money, so I used that a couple of times. I also started getting into and this happened a lot, so I'm just gonna mention it, but I started getting into discussions about civilization and tyranny and there's a place nearby called Dominion, which is this island ruled by a golden dragon. And the golden dragon is called Tizoth, and they're like a good guy dragon. They're like law and order and justice and just like a all round thumbs up good guy dragon, And Dominion is mostly high elves, so it's like the easiest place to be from if you're a high elf in the like locale. So my character Marika is from Dominion, but she's sort of a Dominionite political dissident because she believes that even a benevolent dictator is still a dictator, and if the dragon is always in charge and makes every final choice that there is to make in a land that is ostensibly ruled by noble families, then it's tyranny. It's just a dictatorship. Like, it doesn't matter how you dress it up. It doesn't matter how you say, like, oh, it's good, or they're a good person, or what have you, that it's still, like, that political situation can never change. And I ended up talking about that a whole lot because people kept bringing up Dominion and Tizoth and stuff, because Tizoth was a plot point this game. So I think at one point Alice like said, no, Marika, please don't get started. You'll talk for hours. Like the two of them had this discussion many, many times, and she was just already sick of Marika going on about this like political ideology that she had that nobody agreed with. But yeah, it was fun. So there's that. And a lot of that kind of like talk came up. I think we basically went to sleep after that because it was like Friday night is always exhausting because you do your setup, you get everything going, and it's especially exhausting like after a pandemic because like you're getting back into like socializing with people and saying hello and like even all that stuff feels a lot more difficult than it usually would. It feels a lot more awkward than it usually would. And I think we basically just went to bed after that, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I feel like that was pretty much what happened. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, exactly. You drive a bunch, you do a bunch of setup, you run your ass off for a bit, and then it's 1 a.m. and you pass out. Yeah, basically. So we went to bed. We had one, like, 2-person cot, so Siobhan and I just snuggled up in the cold and went to sleep. In the morning, I got up a little earlier than Siobhan did, than Alice did. And sort of like walked around and talked with some folks, made some more introductions, chatted it up. Nothing major. Just like sort of learning who's around in town, finding out that there's an encampment of ogres and, that they all worship the blood god Ba. And then hearing that there's a camp of like dragon followers and they're all like followers of disparate dragons and different ideologies, and being confused as to how that could work, like how you could have different dragon worshippers all in the same place, and talking with people about that. Having a little bit of breakfast, which was just like a pepperoni stick, or what have you from my supplies. Setting my camp chair out in the shade in front of the tent and just, chilling out for a bit, being comfy, talking with folks. And then Siobhan gets up and wants to make tea. So we have to figure out how we're going to use this burner we've never used before. So we unpack the burner, and it looks like it's going to be a little more complicated than we had hoped. We bought like those Coleman propane tanks, the little green ones. They were not going to fit on this thing. We needed like an actual big propane tank to put on here, So we went to see Wayne, who plays a character named Heartless, but who is like the nicest dude you'll ever meet. Who has a cabin on the site and like spends a lot of time up there. And whenever I have a technical camping issue, Wayne is the person I go to talk to. So went to see Wayne and said, hey, Wayne, can you help us with the burner? We've kind of never done this stuff before, and we want to like make sure we're doing it correctly. So can you help us out with it? And Wayne's like, yeah, of course. Comes over, sort of, brings some tools and sets it up. And helps with like getting it together and just generally being a nice guy and helping us out when he really didn't have to, but I appreciate it a lot. And he eventually says like, oh yeah, you're gonna need like one of those big propane, like barbecue propane canisters for this thing. Let me see if I've got one. And he just like goes and gets one and brings it to us and just goes like, yeah, use this, bring it back on like Sunday or whatever. Which is like so nice, you know what I mean? Like we fucked up. Like we should eat the consequences of having fucked up and not knowing what to do. But like Wayne was just like, yeah, no, I have a can you can use. Here you go. Which is it's so sweet. It's really generous. And it really helped us because it was like part of our little fantasy to do this like tea house thing, and like being able to heat water is important for that. I traded all the little green Coleman fuels for use of the big fuel can, you know what I mean, the big propane can. That seemed fair, like in terms of we were just like getting given fuel to use. And he has a Coleman stove and stuff, so he's like, yeah, I can use these. So it worked out really nicely. But Siobhan went about making tea, and we like offered it to our neighbors because we were like neighbors to this little camp of Ajanti, who are sort of like the Romani of the setting. And one of their players, Andrea, gave us a gold coin because they said it was a silver for a cup of tea, and she gave us a gold and said like, this is 10 cups of tea. So over the course of the game, we would like whenever we were making tea, we would go over and get our cup and like bring it to our camp, and like when the water boiled and the tea steeped, we would pour some tea and bring it over to their camp. Like I think by the end she had 6 cups of tea left on the ledger, if I remember correctly. So that was cool. One of the characters one of the NPCs that I ran into during the Saturday morning was a trade route. For those of you who don't know what trade routes are, I mean, it was the Stalk Syndicate, because the Zenithstrand trade route is called the Stock Exchange. But we're in the Wormwood, so it was the Stock Syndicate, who are better trade routes, basically, like more powerful nature-y trade routes. So for those of you who don't know what a trade route is, it is literally a route, like a tree route, that trades things. Like, you give it a random object, and it gives you a random object, basically. Like, there's no real discussion over what you're trading. It's just random object for random object. It's trade route like the pun, or stock exchange like the pun. Yeah, it's fantasy gachapon. Yeah, basically, yeah. So we ran into this member of the Stock Syndicate, and spoke with them and made my trades, and I traded some random junk. I ended up getting a pair of claw tips for Savar. So Savar are like cat people, who can use natural claws as weapons. And the claw tips allow them to swing for like different kinds of, like carriers. So instead of it just being normal damage, you get like a silver cap to the claws, and you can do like silver damage, that kind of stuff. So I ended up getting some claw tips for Savar and like a jug of alcohol, potent alcohol, on my trade routes. And you can only trade twice, and then they don't let you trade anymore. And that was kind of fun, to do as like a little exchange. And eventually Alice got up, and I had Alice also trade with the route, though we got less good stuff from that trade. So, I was like, well, who the fuck is gonna want these claw tips? Like, there's nobody who wants these. Like, there's no Savar around here as far as I have seen. And probably about an hour after I said that to Tamaru, who was like a wizard friend that I'd met, and played by James. And you may remember Tamaru if you've watched my older videos, from various stories that I told when I was playing Aaron. Tamaru is a fire elementalist mage, and sort of more a peer now than a chaotic annoyance, which is fun. Like I am a similarly skilled wizard to Tamaru. And so we talked a bit, and I was like, who's gonna need these claw tips, And Tamaru says, well, I don't know, maybe someone, And we separate for a little bit, and I'm back at my camp drinking some delicious Genmaicha green tea cooked on our new propane burner with a teapot that whistles, and it's just like delicious green tea in the middle of the day. It really does change your outlook when you can get a nice warm beverage, just whenever. But so I'm drinking some tea, and this character comes up to me, a Savar with a pair of claws. They introduce themselves as Lior, or Leo, and said, "Hey, I hear you have some claw tips." I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I do have some claw tips. So do you want them?" And he says, or they say, "Yeah, I do. What do you want? Like, what do we trade for?" And I reply, "Well, I would like alchemy resources." Because Alice, who is like Siobhan's character, is an alchemist and needs resources so that next game we can come in with like a bunch of remedies and some alchemy and stuff. Like, alchemy is one of those skills that, like, the first game you have it's never useful because you have to front load it with like a bunch of like resources, or in game they call it like RM, raw materials, that you can then turn into stuff at the beginning of a game at logistics, So we're trying to like build a stockpile of alchemy resources so that Alice can have a bunch of stuff next game. And I say, like, so I want alchemy resources for these claw tips. And Lior says, okay, and we go to Lior's camp to try and like dig through their stuff and figure out, what they had to offer. And eventually they said, it doesn't look like I have any alchemy resources. So me being like a severe wizard, said, all right, well, you don't have the resources now, but I'm going to give you the claw tips because I think they will make you more useful. What we're going to agree to is that you're going to bring me the resources you do find for the next little while. Anything that you find, we need between 50 and 100 alchemical resources, and anything you find, you're going to bring it to me as payment for the claw tips. Which seemed like a good idea at the time. And even if it isn't, and even if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to use the claw tips anyway, and selling them to somebody else will be super difficult because there aren't that many Savar who use natural claws as weapons. So easy to get rid of an item that like I basically don't need. And we sort of made this bargain that, they would bring me alchemy resources. Yeah, so Herb Gatherer conscripted, indeed. So we did that, and then I made it back to Alice. And she was kind of waking up and, drinking tea and what have you. And I said, this is what I've done. This is what I've set up for us. Over the course of the day, I've been, like, replenishing people's protections or just generally, like, buffing people as they, like, said they needed it. We found out that there was a tea that could be brewed to remove the weakness from, like, the spores that had caused the weakness from, a bunch of people that had been affected, all of us who are like over level 5. And a lot of like what had been done during the day was finding the reagents to make that tea. So one of them was an ancient goodberry from the aspect of moose. One of them was a treant flower. And another one was, what was the last one? I don't remember what the last one was, but it doesn't matter because I wasn't really involved. The goodberry from the aspect of moose was fun because the moose like came into town and was like, I hear you want my treasure, and like very prideful aspect of moose. And we said like, yes, we do. What do you want in trade for it? Because we knew we couldn't fight the moose because the moose is the aspect of all moose. He'll kick your ass. You know what I mean? Like, he's like the avatar of moose. Don't fuck with nature, nature stuff in the realm of nature. So we're like, well, what do you want for it? And he's like, I require nothing. Which, great response. Super cool. Eventually he gives up that, the goodberries are a trophy from a conflict. Like he killed an arrogant druid 1,000 years ago, and the goodberries are his trophy for that victory. One of our folks stepped forward, Lur, I think, our ogre, one of our ogres, stepped forward and said, well, Lur have trophy. Like, Lur, show trophy, trade, maybe. That kind of stuff. Like, there was this, like, you would give up your trophy in exchange for mine? Yes. Like, and they kind of walked away and, like, did stuff. As a smart person, I didn't want to get close to what could turn into Lur trying to ambush the aspect of moose. So I didn't follow them because I didn't want to die. And I left it at that. Apparently they ended up getting the berries. And in general, like, recovering that stuff. When someone came around for the tree ant flower stuff, they were looking for people who weren't affected by the spores. So people who were lower than level 5, basically. Like, anyone who was lower than level 5, because the tree ants would be mad if anybody infected with the spores came to, like, entreat with them. So it was like, it was one of those low-level characters come and do this thing without the high-level characters interfering with your shit, like mods, which I really love. I love that kind of stuff when you can get it to work. Giving the sort of new characters and low-level characters, like, a chance to do things. And I mean, Alice is technically a low-level character, but Alice also didn't really want to go and entreat with Moose. Or not with Moose, with the treants, so didn't. Most of my Saturday, like, during the day, was spent either talking with Dante, who is this, like, healer, wizard, high elf, and having this conversation about, like, what civilization really means, and, like, who are the people in this town who run the place, and, like, how do you think setting up a business here is going to go, and that kind of stuff, like, just generally, like, talking it out with him. Which was really fun. We talked about ritual magic. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff. It's probably like an hour or so of us just, like, sitting chatting. Calder, the purple dragon, or purple draconian, played by Wyatt, came up excuse me, came up to me a little later in the day after having sent me do some of my magic, and asked about the sigil magic that I knew. Sigil magic in the game is this magic where you draw symbols and then, like, enchant them. So it's kind of like runic magic almost, though that has a different connotation in the game. So it'll be stuff like you draw a symbol on someone and it's like, I craft a sigil of delay, or I craft a sigil of rest, or I craft, but you have to draw the symbol. So it's really hard to cast this stuff during combat because you can't just, like, touch someone's shoulder and cast it. You have to, like, set it up beforehand because you have to draw the symbols. And I had, like, an eyeliner, felt tip eyeliner to do the symbol drawing because that seemed like an easy way to not irritate anybody's skin too much. With the symbols. But so I'd been doing some of that to, like, prepare people for danger, and Calder came up and asked about it and asked if I could if it's possible that I could teach it. And I said yes, though of course there's going to be a cost to that. I could teach you how to cast sigil magic, but we'll have to talk about, like, what I will get out of that discussion. And he said, like, yeah, well, I'll come back and we'll talk about it later. And, he sort of had something to go do at that point and fucked off. And I didn't see him until, like, Sunday. He was just, like, he didn't come back to talk to me. So, until Sunday. But anyway, our Saturday, I'm trying to think if there's any, like, threats, any combat. We spoke to a couple of aspects of various animals, but it was, like, pretty chill mostly. I think a lot of the time Alice and I were like, away from combat or avoiding combat generally, which is just, like, the way the characters are set up. They're not very combat heavy. I can't really fight anything on my own. I can just enchant. I can just buff up fighters to fight better, I could technically, like, get myself to a point where I could fight something if I, like, really expended a whole lot of magic on myself, but it really isn't, like, worth that much. So I mostly just, like, stayed out of it and gave other people enchantments. So I think the next thing on Saturday that happened was we'd been told that we were going to get thrown back into like the real world, quote unquote, the material plane. That was like translocated where we were on top of the wormwood, the plane of nature. And where we were going to come back out was like behind enemy lines in like a citadel fortress of the former town we'd been driven out of before, everything was shut down for 18 months. In what do you call it? In Sylvanwood. The name of the town is Sylvanwood. I know the Wormwood is the nature place and Sylvanwood is the town. And there's like, we know that we're basically going to be inundated with like the forces of the Church of Light when we arrive. We're going to be tossed out into real space and have to like fight, basically. We're to them, we're basically just going to appear from nowhere. But to us, we're going to be, having to like fight through a fort full of soldiers, which isn't great. And apparently some people had been sent to the real world I forgot a big part of Saturday. Okay, so I have to explain a concept to you first. The Mordecheist. The Mordecheist is an elf-killing demigod that hates all elves and wants all elves to die. He's like the elder brother of the elven race and a bad, nasty creature that will fuck shit up just because he hates you. And usually he's trapped in like a demiplane of like a prison demiplane that, he's stuck in. But every now and then, when enough elves have died, he is released and wreaks his vengeance. And then is sent back to his prison demiplane. That's basically his story. Now, we're in the Wormwood, so he can't really get to us. We're in like the plane of nature. But he is free this weekend. Like, he could show up, like according to the stats. Because there's a tracker on the Underworld website that like tracks how many elves have died over the course of time, and it resets when the Mordecheist is let free for a month, and then the tracker goes up and comes back down again, and so on. Yeah, you know how it is. Anyhow, he's technically like allowed to be out, and I never saw him because if I had, I would be dead. That's just the way it is. I never saw him, but apparently, some people got sent on a like scouting mission into like real space, like back onto the material plane, to see what the positions of the Citadel camps were and like where the Church of Light had like set up their stuff and what have you. There was some way for them to like go and then come back through a nature henge. And so they went through the nature henge into like the real world, back into the material plane. And when they emerged into a scene of like, apparently a scene of like carnage, like absolute carnage. There was just dead bodies and like empty clothes where like people had dissipated or what have you. It was just like this scene of carnage that they emerged into. And they're looking around, they're picking through the bodies. And one of the bodies, dressed like all in black with like a black hood and whatever, apparently sits up like Undertaker style. Just like straight up, like just rise from the dead style. And I'm sure this was played by Tammy because Tammy is just like the champ Mordecheist player. Just sits up like Undertaker style and says, "Sense elf." And when a sense call is called, it's not actually, you don't hear it. You just have to respond here like you're, like the guy, like you're being radar pinged. You know what I mean? And apparently, this body sits up Undertaker style, says, "Sense elf." The first person that says here, the Mordecheist throws a packet and obliterates them. And an obliterate is 2 deaths. Like, you take 2 deaths instead of 1. You're turned to dust, nothing can stop it, and you're just completely destroyed. And immediately there's panic, and you hear people yelling, Mordecheist! Like running, back to the portal, trying to escape back to the wormwood. Like, apparently it was just carnage. I mean, I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I did hear people yelling Mordecheist, and there was a bit of panic, like, when we thought, we didn't know it was, like, on a different plane that stuff was happening. But, turns out it was. But yeah, so they, a bunch of people escaped back into the wormwood to escape the clutches of the evil elf-killing demigod. And the Mordecheist can only be out for a certain amount of time. So the fact that he was around means that when we emerged back into the real world, he probably wouldn't be. Which is good. It's good news for us. But everybody was on edge. They're like, he saw us go through into the wormwood. Like, if he has a way to get here, he's going to follow us. There was a lot of, like, worrying about that stuff, which was it took up a lot of Saturday afternoon. Let's put it that way. I had, like, my circle of protection ready and trying not to panic too much, about it, because I didn't want to go run off to a corner and hide for, like, hours when I didn't need to. But yeah. Whew. That was kind of the situation. Because, of course, I've made another character who's an elf. Of fucking course I have. All my characters are elves, basically, other than my one wood fae. And elves are the only ones who have to care, really. Everybody else is just like, if you stay out of the Mordecheist's way, you probably won't have any problems. But yeah, so that was a lot of my Saturday afternoon. Then Siobhan and I had an NPC shift coming up. So we did an NPC shift for the, like, big mod of the game. So on the roster, it said this is, like, the final mod, like the big kahuna fight when the town emerges to fight the Citadel, to fight the Church of Light in the real world, in Sylvanwood. So Siobhan and I had signed up for that because it looked like not a lot of people had, and more NPCs for big mods, the better. When you've got, like, 5 NPCs and you're trying to fight the entire town, it can be a little tough. You know what I mean? Even with respawns, like, you're just outnumbered by, like, 1 million all the time. So this is one of those big mods where we knew they need more people, and we are not really combatant characters, so it made sense for us to go and, like, help. So before I left, to hide, I gave out all my protections buffs and my, sigils of the weapon master and sigils of hatred and all that kind of stuff. And I just, like, buffed up a bunch of the fighters to the 9s, using all my spells, because I knew I'd basically it'd be time to reset my spells for the next day by the time I came back, right? If you're playing an NPC, it also means your PC is safe, right? Yes, correct, yeah. So we went off to hide, and by that we mean we joined the NPC camp, for 3 hours. And, you have to volunteer, right? It's I mean, you don't have to. You can opt out, but, like, for the good of the game, having an NPC shift means you're contributing to, like, other people's fun as well, and the way that you would hope that they would contribute to yours, right? Like, so we did that. There were probably about 8 or 9 of us total, like, to fight, and there were probably about 60 players, maybe 65. Hard to judge, right? But, like, the numbers game is rough, but also it means that, like, we're gonna have higher stats, we're gonna respawn, we're gonna NPC stuff, right? So we get to the camp and they say, like, okay, this NPC shift, we're gonna be playing Church of Light. So get yourself some white tabards and, gear up and stuff and pick a stat card. And that's going to be what you're going to do. And we're going to up all the stat cards by a whole bunch. And we're gonna set it up this way, and we're gonna go up to the hill, and we're gonna do a big hold thing, and there's gonna be a really big surprise as well. We're like, okay, cool, yeah. And they're like, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna have one spawn, then another spawn, and on your second spawn, when you die, stay dead. Just like lie on the ground, and then we're gonna summon the Archangel of Kale. Now, Kale is like the light god, the Batman light god. He's like, burn the witch, kill the heretic, like, bad shit. You know what I mean? Like the most radical good guy. And an Archangel is like, you need global plot permission to involve one, because they're basically indestructible, right? They're like super, super, super dangerous. They're like, they swing for arcane damage, which is unresistible. They have an arcane threshold, which means that you can't hurt them unless you can do arcane damage. Like, they're basically indestructible. They're absolutely unkillable. So we set ourselves up on the hill. I had been given a role of rogue, like a rogue role. So I had a little stiletto knife and alchemy, and some dodges and some rogue skills. Basically, was my like NPC, my Kaleite NPC. Siobhan was playing like some kind of like paladin, like weaver character who had like light magic, because she's very familiar with the light sphere because one of her characters has it. And she was just kind of like doing, dramatic paladin stuff. And then there were a bunch of people with swords and shields and a bunch of mages. It was cool. Like we set it up in a way that was dangerous. And also players are so not ready for multiple alchemies being thrown at them. I felt as the rogue character that I did quite a lot of damage, which I was supposed to. I died a lot, but I also kamikazed the hell out of people with like rogue skills. Stuff like executes and vital blows and stuff that are like, if you get hit by this, you drop into your bleed count, or like these kinds of things that like, if I can get a hit on you, it'll do damage. And the idea was that we were trying to like drain them of resources, like obviously we're not going to be able to win against 50 people. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to happen, right? But draining them of resources, making them use their spells, use their protections, like all this other stuff, like that was the idea. Like make it feel scary, scare them, like make them think that maybe the next wave they won't have enough left, like that kind of stuff. But so anyway, let's talk about the Archangel of Kale. So on the first spawn, we're like, what the hell? These people are just appearing out of nowhere, because they're coming in from the wormwood into like the material plane, and they're just like appearing. And we're fighting these heretics, and dying and what have you. And everything starts to like slow down as stuff kind of gets killed, and we're giving out our alert and what have you. And then Tammy calls a hold. And a hold is something that's like an out-of-game call that everybody stop, So you call a hold, and then everybody else echoes the hold so that everybody can hear it, and everybody stops while something is described or something is dealt with, You would call a hold for like a medical emergency. You would call a hold for a narrative description thing for like GM stuff, these kinds of situations where everybody needs to stop and shut up. So calls a hold, and Tammy says, a beam of sunlight shoots down from the heavens. And everybody, you could see the faces of the people around me like, oh shit. and she calls the lay on. She says, as soon as I call the lay on, power word area 10 light to everybody who can hear. So power word areas, if you can hear it, you take the effect. So as soon as I call the lay on, power word area 10 light, which will go straight to people's like body. And then power word area life. So she goes 3, 2, 1, lay on. The angel lands. Bam! 10 light damage to everybody who can hear it, which is like not insignificant. And then all of the Kalites who are down, all of us who are like dying or whatever, get back up and start going about our fighting again, shivving people. But what's really great is that all the large combatants are fighting this angel. So the NPCs are free to kind of like engage with some people that aren't like, quite as like hyper armored or what have you, like these kinds of things. And sort of like try and challenge people on sort of a more medium level, which is nice. The fight with the angel gets kind of like moving, and the angel is like pretty much indestructible, but like drags a whole bunch of people off in another direction, towards the fort. But I'm left behind where we started, kind of spawning and trying to like get some stabs in on people and what have you. I was told to just like keep coming out of the bushes and like ambushing people as they were moving, that kind of thing. I had a lot of fun playing this rogue build. Rogues are scary because honestly, if you get up on someone and you get the knife fizz rep on them, there are a bunch of abilities you can call that are just like, and you lose. You know what I mean? One of the things I was told that I could do was that I could have contact slow death on my knife. So like alchemy, that if I hit you with my knife, you have 60 seconds until you die. Which is super, super fun in terms of like just like figure it out, man. Like you're gonna die. And watching people like try and solve that stuff is really fun. Yeah, we were given some really nasty stuff. Like our NPCs were tough. They were very, very strong. Because they needed to be to make this mod the like dramatic end game mod that it was. So eventually the Archangel gets pulled over to this fight with Dragon, and I think Tizoth showed up, but I didn't really know about what was going on. But Tizoth ended up killing the dragon, or killing the angel with a breath weapon. Like the actual gold dragon Tizoth showed up, and like fucked this angel up for some reason. I don't know the reason, because I was busy stabbing people. You know what I mean? Like my job was keep running and stabbing. So I wasn't paying attention to the like overarching plot situation. I don't know why Tizoth was there. But the actual gold dragon Tizoth showed up and destroyed the angel. And from then on, it was just us soldiers fighting the town. And we had a couple of moments where like I think they thought they'd won because we'd like stop spawning and like go back and ask Tammy if we should like spawn back out or whatever. We'd take a break for some water, because it takes a lot out of you if you're fighting for like half an hour, 45 minutes, like going on an hour of like basically constant activity. We had one of the players brought us a cooler with some water and said like take whatever you want, like ice cold water. Oh, sweet relief for an NPC. Seriously. And we hit them more times than I think they expected. We kept seeing them go like, I think we've won, and then we'd spawn in again and fight them again. Or there was one spawn where we pretended to go back to plot camp. Like we all went out of game and we walked towards where the plot camp was. So like, you're not supposed to acknowledge NPCs that are out of game. You're not supposed to acknowledge anything that's out of game, really. But people do it unconsciously, right? So we like tried to fake them out. We like walked back down to where the plot camp was, around the corner from anybody who could see us, and we spawned like out of view. And then when some of them came like walking down the hill to like go back to their camps or whatever, we came running around the corner like, for Kale! And they all ran back up the hill to like join the big group because they were all like isolated because they thought it was over. Yeah, it's really funny. So we did a couple of things like that. And eventually they won and they pushed the Kalites out. And by that time it was like getting dark. We went back to the plot camp. We sat down. We told some stories of our NPC exploits to each other because it's just fun, you know. You just get these expendable characters and you get to play with the skills, you know, and see how it all works, and it feels really like kind of cool. Excuse me. And yeah, so we went back to plot camp and we were getting ready to like do the next thing, and Tammy said, well, it's 9:30, so we don't really have time to set up another mod. You guys can go back into character. So, you know, we got our stuff and went back into to be our player characters again and like hear all the stories and stuff from the battle. And so I met up with Sir Estvain, and Sir Estvain was like, that magic you gave me, it's good. I'm like, I'm glad it worked out for you. I found out later that what that meant was during the combat, Sir Estvain had gotten decapitated by one of the enemy fighters, the Kalite fighters, the NPCs, and used a sigil of delay to delay being decapitated by 1 minute. So, like, you get hit with a decapitation. Sigil of delay means that in 60 seconds, the decapitation will happen, but you've got 60 seconds to figure it out. Yeah. So, like, if you get a magic armor put on you or something, it'll defend you from the decapitation when it goes off. Like, that kind of stuff, you know? It's just like, really cool little interactions that I hadn't thought of. I'll deal with that in a second, but first I'm going to kill you. Yeah, it's just like really funny. So Saturday night was pretty chill after the big mod. Like, everybody was tired and lots of skills have been used. We set up the tea house. We had a little tea with some people. We had some relaxing times. There was a party over at the Ashanti camp where the Ashanti had paid someone or several people to do like to dance, and like they were getting people to tip them, and it was like a big raucous fun time. And then one of the things that happened was we met a kobold who had been born several minutes ago. Because kobolds in Underworld are like vermin and they reproduce super quickly. And this kobold had come with the bog camp, and the bog camp is like the blood god, like violence camp, like a lot of ogres and orcs and stuff. And she introduced herself as Lacey, the murderer. Sorry, kobolds speak like this. She introduced herself as Lacey, the murderer. Because apparently she killed her brother immediately upon being born, and now she craves violence. She just wants to punch people in the throat and violence, you know, like kind of a kobold, which is really funny from a little kobold. And there was a lot of like mentions of how long she'd been alive. She's like, in my 9 minutes of life, I have already taken 2 lives myself, you know, like stuff stupid stuff. And she's like, she turned to Alice and I and was like, would you worship Ba? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll worship Ba for 20. Like Alice was like, I'll worship Ba for 18 minutes, which is double the amount of time you've been alive. And Lacey's like, hell yeah! You know, like, just really excited about it. And she's like, all right, well, if you're gonna worship Ba, you have to punch someone. You have to punch him really hard. You know, and Alice was like, okay, sure. I will punch someone. And she winds up her fist. She does like this big, like pulls her sleeve up, like winds up her fist, and then just punches a random, like nearby wizard for 1 normal. The guy's like, ow, what the hell? She's like, I worship Ba, I have to punch you. And I said, aw, I want to punch someone. And Lacey says, you worship Ba as well? And I'm like, yes, I will. And I also punched the same wizard. And he's like, why? We're like, well, we worship Ba. We have to punch you. That's just how it is. That's what's up. But she was just like a comic relief kobold. It was like really funny. She was played so well, and she was just like trying to punch people or like get the ogres to throw her at people so she could like Superman punch them, or just like generally like bragging about how powerful she is and like cool, you know? And the way that she was speaking was like really, I think my favorite kobold voice ever, which was really long, big words, but like, in the squeaky voice, you know what I mean? Like, Father, I crave violence. In my 35 minutes of life, I have never felt more jubilant than I have when I was punching that man. You know, stuff like that. Like, you know, just like these like really long lines of like, you know, smart sounding words, but in this like squeaky kobold voice. It was super funny. It was like a really, really good little like break mod. And she eventually went off with the Ba followers, and we just like laughed and, you know, went back to our camp. But it's worth mentioning because she's super funny. We went to bed shortly after that. I think Saturday night we were pretty tired. The NPC shift took a lot of energy. We went to bed. And then Sunday morning, I woke up and sort of, you know, said hi to people, socialized with folks. And then some ice elementals came into town, and we had to fight them. There's these big ice elementals. I don't know where they came from, but they were there. I spent that whole fight mostly like standing on people's shoulders and like putting, you know, like protection spells back on them when the protections were like fell off or what have you. You know, I kind of like ran across the back of the battle line, just like buffing people, which felt like a really good way to spend my time in a combat. Very different from my previous character. And Alice was awake for the second wave of elementals. And we picked up some loot from them, some catalysts, which is nice, a little bit of loot. Oh, the other thing is, for participating in the big mod, we got to take some loot from like the loot bin, like random grab of loot for like what our characters had found during the battle, you know? Which I think is a really nice way to reward people for volunteering. Like, sometimes you get more loot volunteering than you would actually looting stuff, you know? Which is really nice. It feels good to be able to say, like, well, I wasn't my character for that 3 hours, so I didn't get the, like, you know, the camaraderie of being in a deadly fight together, but I did get, a couple gems or something, you know, like, for helping. It's nice. But yeah, so we killed the ice elementals, and then there was a call that the remaining Church of Light soldiers were running to the docks to try and, like, regroup with a warship that was off the coast. And so we went to go and smash their shit up. And we did. We did soundly smash their shit up. And that was the end of the game, basically. You know? Alice and I tallied up our stuff and like, made sure the ledger was complete as to, like, what we had. Oh, I forgot. Before the game ended, but after the violence, we sat down with Calder. And Calder we were trying to make the contract for Calder's tutelage in sigil magic. And initially we were like, well, you could stay with us and act as security for our tea house because you have psionic magic. So putting people to sleep or paralyzing them or what have you, like that's good security stuff because it's non-lethal. But he seemed like a little reticent to like move his camp or spend a lot of time hanging out with us, and that's fine. You know, like that's totally fine. So we eventually came to the decision that what we wanted was, and I'm gonna write this contract. I have to write it out. So maybe we'll do that tomorrow during our writing stream. We'll write Calder's contract. But we talked it back and forth, Alice and I and Calder, and we came to the eventual conclusion that what we wanted was all alchemy resources that he finds in perpetuity. So he's not an alchemist. He doesn't need alchemy resources. So anything that he finds that is alchemy related comes to our camp and straight to Alice's pockets, right? In perpetuity, meaning forever. And 75 gold worth of valuables. So like coins or gems or stuff worth money. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, 75 gold worth of that. And that'll be enough for me to teach them sigil magic. And the idea was that I would teach them anyway, and that they would keep paying this debt until it was paid off. The same way that, like, Lior owes me alchemy. I didn't want to, like, gatekeep the teaching. I just wanted there to be, like, some recompense for that roleplay, you know? Because it does actually cost me a resource to teach. There's a skill called Teacher, and you need to use frags to buy it. And frags are, like, the out-of-game, like, microtransaction currency of Underworld that you get for, like, volunteering or for, like, donations or for whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, the microtransaction currency of Underworld. And you need frags to be able to take the teacher skills. So getting some in-game resource recompense for using frags to get the teacher skill to teach this person this thing is, like, fair. You know what I mean? It feels fine to me. Because it's not a net neutral thing. So I said I was going to write up a contract and that I would have it for him the next time that we were together. And that he could sign that, and then we will, we'll be all sorted. As to beginning sigil lessons. So I'll have to think of what I'm going to do for sigil lessons as well, which will be fun. So I have a student, Calder, the purple dragon, or purple draconian, sorry. Sigil student. And they're going to pay me 75 gold worth of stuff and all their alchemy resources in perpetuity. Yay! And then the game was over. The game ended while Siobhan and I were counting out our stuff. Because I'm trying to, like, make sure I keep count and I keep, like, a ledger for the resources that the tea house has. Right now, that's just Siobhan and I. So we made a proper count. And the game ended while that was happening. And then it was, like, taking everything down and, doing the opposite of putting it all up. Everything always feels like there's less of it when you're putting it back into the car than when you put it into the car initially. It might be because there is actually less of it because you, like, eat some of the food and stuff. But it also just feels, like, way easier to pack up than it does to set up. And then we headed off to afters, which is, like, the sort of, like, out of game hangout debrief, fist bump with your friends, like, about how cool everything was. Hangout, and the afters was at a Boston Pizza in Lloydminster, which is a town on the border between Alberta and Saskatchewan. And we had delicious afters. I ate a ton of nachos to regain all the lost calories over the weekend. There is nothing better than mediocre Boston Pizza food after eating, like, LARP camping supplies all weekend. Like, oh my God. Like, it's so good. It's so good. Even if the food is not like that amazing, it just tastes so amazing when you eat it after having been like so camp fooded out. Um and then we headed home and you know, pet the cats and chilled out for the evening. I saw Siobhan looking at Underworld skills and like builds and stuff, which is like really exciting for me because I don't think she really like had decided whether or not she liked her character or not until she played it, and knowing that she's looking at what the build could be in the future means that she wants to play the character more, which makes me really happy. Um